Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about the best case scenario for Kamala Harris in the 2024 presidential race and how this landslide scenario is truly in the realm of possibility in 2024. This seven or so path to an electoral landslide in the 2024 election are really much so a shock to the system. It would come as a surprise to virtually everybody, especially, political pundits and analysts and all them in the media class, in the political media class. And the fact of the matter is, it is entirely in the realm of possibility, this map that we're going to take a look at. Just briefly before we're starting, we have gotten some new data from polling among early voters in swing states. This is polling done, of course, by CNN, as you can see here, but they specifically took the vote shares of people who have already voted early. And as you can see, across every single battleground state, women are voting much more than men. Now, is it just, because it's early voting? I don't know. I don't really know why women, for some reason, would vote early while men vote on election day, especially when you look at some of these margins. In Wisconsin, it's a margin of 11 points, women voting more than men. Michigan, it's 10 points. North Carolina, it's 10 points. And the list goes on. Georgia and Pennsylvania, it's 12 points. And as you can see, the list goes on in the 7 battleground states. Obviously, women are breaking heavily for Harris in this election. And, as this whatever account says, the formula for Harris to win, it's a simple formula to get more women to vote than men. And as we saw in 2022, this is possible. Women are so motivated to vote now in this post-Roe era, of course, because of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And as long as she retains any sort of gap like this, where women are voting a few points more than men, because of how much they're breaking for Harris women compared to men, she will win the election just like that. Now, this is just one data point, but it is an important one. Women and men, the gender divide is so important because it's so broad. It covers the entire nation, and as you can see here, it covers all the states. And, of course, you've got early voting data. Looks very strong for Democrats in the blue wall, as well as Georgia and North Carolina as well. Not so much in Nevada and Arizona, but we are awaiting early votes across all the all the swing states, all the early voting states. Obviously, we've still got 5 days to go. So with that being said, let's get started with this video. So first of all, what you're looking at now is some of the states that I've characterized safe for either party. Even if even if it's not a best case scenario, at least for the Democratic ones, these are all going safe for Harris, and all the red states are safe states that would typically, in my current forecast, be characterized as safe for Donald Trump, as you can see here, all the ones listed right here, which is over a 15% margin. But he does lose a few. If this is Harris's landslide scenario, Donald Trump is losing a few to the likely margin characterization, but they still do go to him regardless, so it doesn't really matter. That's Kansas, that's Montana, that's Nebraska's 1st district, and that would be Missouri and probably Indiana as well. So what that means, right off the bat, you could see, for example, Missouri went to Trump by 15.4, Indiana by 16.1. So he is losing ground. So the fact of the matter is, in Kamala Harris's landslide scenario in the 2024 race, how she could get a landslide in the 2024 election, it would require gaining a few points here and there. Not if it's a landslide scenario, she can't just match Biden's number because, yes, the Electoral College number was lopsided, but across the battleground states, it was still close. It would require Harris to be gaining from Biden's 2020 numbers, as you can see in just these states right here. So you've got these 8 blue states, and then, of course, in Harris's best case scenario, she's going to gain at least one. For sure, Colorado. Colorado only voted for Biden by 13.5, trending blue state. If Harris picks up a point or two, then it's safe right there. Now, there are a lot of other states that could be possible, but I wouldn't be comfortable putting any more even in, again, this is Harris's landslide scenario in the 2024 race. So now let's move on to likely states. These are 5 to 15% margins for each respective candidate. Now, again, what you're looking at here is my forecast, which is going to change just today. I'm going to make a new video. Major changes regarding the closest states. That's, of course, the topic for a whole separate video. As of now, as of this minute, as of this hour, this is my forecast. Again, this doesn't really matter. But it does, but you can kind of get a grasp here of the likely states and whatever and down. So you've got these likely states. A few of them are not going to change from my forecast. They're not going to change characterization. For example, South Carolina is an 11.5% win for Trump right now. That won't be reduced to below 5% to make it lean. A state like South Carolina is going to stay likely. We've also seen time and time again in Nebraska's second district that even though it was pretty close to being lean in 2020, 7.4%, Trump has this really strong appeal in Maine's second district, and I don't think that Kamala Harris is the right candidate to break that white rural working class appeal, independent appeal that is specifically in Maine's second congressional district. Also, well, honestly, no, I was going to say Alaska, but no, I could actually see that one narrowing up. And very bad sign for the Trump campaign, but that is it for his likely states. We'll now move on to likely states for the Harris campaign. So, I was talking about before these states that could be pretty close to being safe, but aren't quite 15% margins, even in the landslide scenario. That's New Mexico, that's Virginia, that's New Hampshire, that's Maine, that's Minnesota. States that we're not talking about too much, and for a good reason. They probably won't be that close, even in the realistic scenario. Joe Biden won them all by pretty strong margins in the 2020 election. I think Minnesota was the smallest margin of all the ones I just listed, which was a 7.1% victory. And it, goes all the way up to Virginia, which was a 10.1% victory. You've also got Nebraska's second congressional district. That should come as a surprise to nobody. That's likely Democrat. And with that being said, we are now moving on to lean states. So now they start to get interesting. Now they start to be competitive. And I just realized, I'm so minded in this actual 2024 race. That's where my mind is right now. That I forgot, in this landslide scenario, some of these crucial swing states that we talk about so much that are so close in my forecast right now, as you can see, they would actually be likely. Michigan would be a likely state for Kamala Harris. It was Biden's strongest state in the 2020 race, 2.8%. So you could just see, if Harris is gaining 2 points from Biden's margin in 2020, she wins the state by over 5 points. It would be well, it would be 4.8, but whatever. She's gaining 2.2 points. That would be exactly 5%. For Michigan, if we see the trend here, and this is going to be a very strong trend across many states. Let's see. But the strongest trend from 2016 to 2020. Wow, of course it's not showing me it here unless it's just loading. Was the suburbs. That's going to go for many states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, especially. Here we go. Here's the trend from 2016 to 2020. I'm sorry, from 2020 to 2016, whatever. I don't know. It's being weird. I'm gonna stop that. But a lot. The point being, didn't really get to my point there. The point being, these states that are, that Biden did win in 2020, but may have gone to Trump in 2016. The strongest areas are the suburbs. And those are the types of voters Kamala Harris will be able to really trend towards the left in 2024. Not even necessarily her, with the fact that Donald Trump has turned away these types of voters, right? These college educated white voters. Biden won them by 3 in 2020. Harris is ahead among white college educated voters by 14 points. Plus 3 in 2020, plus 14 in 2024. You've got a lot of them around Detroit in the state of Michigan. You've got a lot of them in the suburbs around Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, and the list goes on. You've got a lot in Maricopa County, Arizona. It wouldn't surprise me if Michigan goes likely blue and Pennsylvania goes likely blue. These are both in the realm of possibility. Kamala Harris can win both of these states by over 5%. I guarantee you that it is in the realm of possibility. The polls, for example, the margins line up perfectly. The final polls in 2022, I can actually pull it up, said that Dr. Oz would win in the state of Pennsylvania by by less than a percentage point or something. I think it was some like, whoops, oh, we got to go to Senate here. I think it was some like 0.7% or something like that. By 0.5%, he led on election day, Dr. Oz, by 0.5%. John Fetterman ended up winning by 5 points. The polls here overestimated the Republican candidate by 5 points. So the fact of the matter is that that Trump is now leading by basically what Dr. Oz was leading by right up until election day. almost exactly it by 0.4% compared to Oz's 0.5%. So don't be surprised come election day if Harris does in fact win it by the 5% that John Fetterman did in the 2022 races. So Michigan and Pennsylvania go to Kamala Harris, and they're already at 260 electoral votes. You need 270 to win. I would also add one more, that being Nevada. The early voting turnout, this one I'd be skeptical of because the early voting turnout does indicate a pretty close race. But what Kamala Harris really, time and time again in polls, has been proven to do is turn out Latino women. They are turning out in record numbers for Kamala Harris. If that does translate to, same amount as we're seeing in polls on election day, then she could win Nevada by a likely margin. That's definitely not outside the realm of possibility. So that now she's at 266. Now let's move on to lean states. These are 1 to 5% margins for each respective candidate. So starting with Donald Trump, he's got, wow, Alaska, 3 electoral votes. Alaska voted for him by 10 points, in the 2020 race, and polls are already indicating in Alaska, some of the most accurate, that they do narrow up. So that's a surprise in itself. The latest poll has him matching his margin in 2020, but the ones before that had him losing 3, losing 2, losing 5 by, winning by only 5 points when he won it by 5 in 2020. That was a real shocker when that poll came out. So if Kamala Harris just outperforms the polls a little bit, Alaska could narrow down to a lean margin. Then you've got Iowa and Ohio. These were very Republican states in both 2016 and Donald Trump. Iowa and Ohio were 9.4 and 8.1% margins, respectively, for Trump in 2016, and 8.2 and 8% margins in 2020. So as you can see, very little trend towards the left from 2016 to 2020, which was not the case in most states across the nation. So Trump really has made both these states very much more partisan in these past few years during his term. He has a strong appeal here. And, just simple, Harris isn't gaining more than 8 points in these states, even in her landslide scenario. It just isn't happening. But can she gain 4 points? Yes. A poll in Iowa literally indicated that the most accurate pollster in the nation right after the debate had Trump ahead, Selzer and Company, had Trump ahead by only 4 points. Now, this was early September, very outdated, but they're releasing their final poll. Again, very accurate pollster, A+ by far. They're releasing their final poll this Sunday, so we'll see how that changes. But Iowa and Ohio, in Trump's best case scenario, in Harris's best case scenario, are both lean for Trump. Now, as for Harris, she has quite a few lean states. Of course, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Georgia should come at the surprise of nobody. Joe Biden won all these states in 2020. Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, all by tilt margins. Wisconsin by 0.6, Arizona by 0.3, Georgia by 0.2. But again, if Kamala Harris is able to increase voter turnout among Democrats, which is already being seen in Georgia, the early voting has surpassed that already. With 5 days to go, early voting in Georgia has surpassed that of 2020. So clearly there is, and of course 2020 was record turnout, right? 2020 had the highest turnout in decades and decades and decades. So the fact of the matter is, voters are turning out, across the nation in such high numbers, which always, high voter enthusiasm, high voter turnout always helps Democrats. It was high in 2008, Obama won in a landslide. It was high in 2020, Joe Biden won. It was super low in 2016, Hillary Clinton lost. So all these signs are pointing very good for Kamala Harris. And as you'll see in my latest forecast update, this will, this newfound enthusiasm for the Democratic campaign, that will have a profound impact on how some of these states will go. Very important forecast update. And on top of that, Harris has one more. North Carolina. Shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. However, it was the one of the 7 battleground states, the only one, to vote for Trump in 2020. They voted for him by 1.3, but I could very well see Harris gaining 2 or 3 points in North Carolina. This is a very nationalized race, right? Democrats have put lots of time and energy into this race. And it is a rapidly trending left state. They gained an electoral vote from 2020 to 2024. They had 15 in 2020. Now they're at 16. That's important. That means that more people are moving to Democratic areas, of course, urban areas or suburbs, simply, from California, New York, these blue states that are losing population, but these liberal-minded people, they are making these swing states more blue. With that being said, the last two states are important, of course. 40 and 30 electoral votes, the second and third most populous states in the nation, will both be tilt in Harris's landslide scenario. You've got Texas and Florida, of course. So, one of these states I think is possible for Kamala Harris, and she would win in a landslide scenario. The other, I do not think is. I think that Texas will go to Kamala Harris in her landslide scenario, and Florida will go to Donald Trump even in Harris's landslide scenario. As you can see in my forecast, Texas is currently projected to be a 5.3% margin for Harris, 5.8% margin, I'm sorry, for Trump, 5.8% margin in Florida for Harris. Now, these are relatively what I don't know what I was about to say, but as you can see, Texas is a bit closer than Florida, and really that 0.5% difference in such, when we're talking about tilt margins, a difference like that, will determine how a state votes. But Texas is different because Texas is interesting, and because of how rapidly growing Democratic it is, we don't really know the level of Democratic turnout. We don't know how much these suburbs are going to trend towards the Democratic Party. You can just see from 2012 to 2016, look at those counties around Dallas County: Tarrant, Denton, and Collin County. From 2012, they were all solid margins for Mitt Romney. Just 8 years later in 2020, one of them went to Biden, and the other two were razor thin, well, not razor thin, but 8% and 4% margins, respectively, in Denton and Collin. So, yes, it is possible for, Texas to have a surge in really, just Democratic votes, just Democratic percentage. That is, if these more, conservative, socially conservative Latino communities along the Rio Grande Valley, if those aren't a disaster for Dems. You can see from 2016 to 2020, they actually became more Republican, even though the state as a whole got more Democratic. These counties along the Rio Grande Valley, these heavily Latino communities, they became more Republican in 2020. If Harris can do something to win those voters back and the suburbs continue to trend left, Texas is possible. Florida, on the other hand, was a closer margin in the 2020 election, only a 3.5% margin compared to Texas's 5.5%. But the thing is, Florida is becoming rapidly more Republican, not Democratic, right? I mean, for example, you had just insane margin decrease in, for example, in Miami-Dade County, they voted for Hillary Clinton by 30 points. They voted for Biden by only 7. Florida was one of the only states in 2020 to become more Republican in 2020 compared to 2016. Not to mention the gubernatorial race in 2022. DeSantis won by a record 20 points. And the early voting looks like a disaster for Democrats. Florida really is solidified for the Republican Party in decades to come, I believe. But regardless, it's a landslide for Harris. 359, 179, all swing states plus Texas all go to Kamala Harris, and that 40, that extra 40, that is massive. So thank you all for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe down below. That helps out a lot. Again, I hope you all enjoyed. Drop a comment. Let me hear your thoughts on this topic, and I will see you all later.